Hey there, everyone. Before we dive into this unsettling true life story, I want to remind you to hit that subscribe button on my YouTube channel if you enjoy in-depth dives into real criminal cases and mysteries. Trust me, you won't want to miss what we're about to uncover, because what started as a single 911 call spiraled into one of the most chilling investigations ever to hit Preston County. Ready? Let's begin. It all began on a warm summer night in Preston County, Ohio, a place most people think of as quiet farmland and close-knit neighbors. Officer Jonathan Bradley had been on patrol for hours, cruising the outskirts where the streetlights were few and far between. He was about to call it a night when a call crackled over his radio. Someone driving along a remote back road spotted a small cardboard box that didn't look right. The caller couldn't elaborate, just sounded scared. Bradley felt a pang of unease. Usually, such calls led nowhere, but something in the dispatcher's tone made him flick on his siren. Arriving at the site, he stepped into the hush of the countryside. Sparse moonlight revealed a battered box near the edge of the asphalt, half concealed by tall grass. He approached warily, flashlight in hand. At first, it seemed like ordinary trash until he heard the faintest of whimpers. Heart-pounding, he carefully lifted the top flap. Inside lay a baby boy, no more than a few months old, swaddled in a grimy blanket. Bradley stood frozen, shock and anger warring inside him. He'd served in law enforcement for almost a decade, responding to everything from traffic stops to burglaries. But never had he found a baby abandoned in a cardboard box on a deserted road. The boy's breathing was shallow, his lips pale. Bradley immediately radioed for an ambulance. In the minutes before help arrived, he tried to keep the infant warm, removing his own light jacket to wrap around the baby's trembling body. The child gave a weak cry, and Bradley spoke gentle words, promising he'd be safe. The paramedics arrived in a flurry, securing the baby in an infant carrier and rushing him to Preston County General Hospital. Bradley watched the red taillights vanish into the darkness, mind spinning with questions. Who would do this? Where was the mother? Word spread fast. Small towns gossiped quickly, and the local TV station picked up the story. Baby found in box near Quiet Farm Road, read the scrolling headline. People across Preston County began phoning the police station, offering blankets, diapers, even adoption. But while the outpouring of support comforted Bradley, it also underscored the central mystery. Why had no one come forward to claim the baby? By dawn, the story reached Detective Sarah Collins, a seasoned investigator known for her tenacity. She had handled numerous cases involving child neglect but had never seen a family vanish so thoroughly that not one relative reported a missing infant. That first day, she sped between the hospital and the county records office, trying to match the baby's description with any recent births or missing persons cases. Nothing fit. Doctors at Preston County General informed her that the infant, nicknamed Adam until they had a legal name, was severely dehydrated but likely to recover with proper care. No visible bruises or signs of overt physical abuse, but clear indications of malnourishment. Sarah's gut clenched. There was something intentionally secretive about all this, something colder than a typical abandonment. If a teenage mother panicked, she might leave the baby at a fire station or even a public space. But a deserted road at midnight? That felt deliberate. Meanwhile, Officer Bradley returned to the scene multiple times, scouring the brush for footprints, tire tracks, anything that might reveal who left the box. He found impressions of car tires in the dirt, but no license plate shards or distinct patterns. The evidence was maddeningly sparse. As the sun rose on the second day, Bradley drove back to the station, replaying the discovery in his mind. The hush, the baby's soft cries, the wave of outrage he felt. Nothing in his training could have prepared him for a moment like that. He wondered if the person who did this was lurking somewhere nearby, watching the story unfold on the news, and whether they felt any remorse. Sarah, for her part, dove headfirst into the puzzle. She created a timeline, cross-referencing the approximate time the box was spotted with 911 logs, searching for calls about suspicious cars or people in the area. A few leads trickled in. A farmer who thought he saw headlights on the dirt road close to 10 p.m., a passing driver who noticed an old sedan parked oddly. But none of it pinpointed a suspect. News outlets latched onto the story's emotional core. Social media lit up with outrage, with hundreds of residents posting that they would have gladly taken the baby in if only asked. Alongside the sympathy, though, loomed an uncomfortable truth. Someone wanted this infant out of their life in the cruelest way possible. That evening, Sheriff Tom Alderman, a steady presence in the county for 2 decades, held a brief press conference in front of the station. He appealed to the public for assistance, Any clues or sightings were welcome. He also assured that the baby was receiving top-notch medical care and that the department wouldn't stop until they found answers. Even as official channels tried to maintain calm, the rumor mill churned. Some speculated the child was taken from out of state. Others spread wild theories about cults or human trafficking. Sarah tuned most of it out, focusing on verifiable facts. Yet she couldn't deny there was something deeply off about how carefully everything had been done, from choosing a rarely traveled road to leaving no real evidence behind. As night fell for the second time since the discovery, both Sarah and Bradley felt the weight of a question that refused to go away. If whoever left baby Adam went to such lengths to cover their tracks, what else were they hiding? That lingering dread became the backdrop to an investigation about to plunge them deeper into darkness than they ever thought possible. Detective Sarah Collins arrived at the station bright and early, fueled by 2 cups of coffee and an unshakable resolve. It had been less than 48 hours since Officer Bradley found baby Adam, yet her desk already overflowed with files, phone messages, and lab requests. The entire Preston County Sheriff's Office seemed on high alert. Calls poured in from media outlets, while local residents bombarded dispatch with anxious questions. Her first stop was Preston County General Hospital to check on the baby. A soft beep of monitors accompanied the faint hum of overhead lights. A nurse in pale blue scrubs gently rocked the child, who blinked in that new-to-the-world way. Dr. Emerson, the pediatric specialist, briefed Sarah. Adam remained underweight but was stable, responding well to fluids and careful feeding. Standing by the bedside, Sarah felt a pang of protective instinct. She had no children of her own, but the sight of this defenseless infant, with no name and no known family, stirred a deep urgency in her. The detective in her craved answers, but the human side just wanted him safe. By mid-morning, she was back at the station, sifting through the leads that poured in overnight. One caller claimed to have seen a woman in a hoodie lingering near that same road the previous week. Another insisted they'd heard a baby crying in an abandoned trailer near the county line. The tips were vague and unconfirmed, but Sarah's methodical approach demanded she log every detail. Officer Bradley joined her, still haunted by the memory of finding Adam. He'd spent the morning revisiting the scene, discovering a single faint tire tread that might belong to a mid-sized sedan. With no clarity on the vehicle model or license plate, it was slim evidence, but better than nothing. They convened with Sheriff Alderman in his corner office. Tall file cabinets lined the walls, evidence of the county's storied history, from petty burglaries to drug busts. Alderman had a grave expression. "We're dealing with a child abandonment case, but it could be worse," he began. "We don't know if this child was kidnapped first. We can't rule out trafficking or something else." Sarah and Bradley exchanged uneasy looks. They'd both considered that possibility. Alderman continued, "We can't let rumors run wild, but we also can't dismiss them outright. Follow every lead, no matter how outlandish." Sarah's next move was to coordinate with the county's Child Protective Services to see if any at-risk newborn cases were on file. She discovered the hospital's records showed no births matching Adam's approximate age in the past several months, at least not under normal circumstances. No one had reported an infant with the same general description missing or stolen, either. It was as though he'd appeared out of thin air. In parallel, Bradley focused on canvassing the quiet neighborhoods near the discovery site. Most people recognized him. They offered polite smiles but little substantive information. A few recalled seeing headlights late at night, yet none could swear to seeing a person placing a cardboard box on the roadside. A hush fell whenever questions grew too specific, as if the residents were spooked by the idea that the culprit might still be nearby. On day 3, a curious tip came in from an older woman who lived 2 miles away. She claimed to have glimpsed a gray sedan driving slowly toward the highway around the time Adam was found. "Looked old, American-made, maybe an 80s model," she recalled. Bradley jotted down the details, though the county was littered with older cars, making the search daunting. Sarah also received a call from a local pastor who said a distressed parishioner had visited the church confessional at dawn, someone consumed by guilt over a lost baby. The pastor refused to reveal the person's identity, citing religious confidentiality, but suggested the culprit might be wrestling with remorse. This clue, while intangible, hinted that moral or religious conflict might be in play. All the while, the hospital staff kept Sarah updated on Adam's progress. He gained a few ounces, responding to formula and gentle care. No one had stepped forward to claim or identify him. With each passing day, the possibility that a frantic, remorseful parent would appear grew slimmer. Sarah feared that if a family abandoned him once, they might never come forward of their own accord. Sheriff Alderman authorized a dedicated tip line, and the station was flooded with calls, some borderline hysterical, others suspiciously eager to point fingers at ex-partners or reclusive neighbors. Sifting fact from fiction became a full-time task. By the end of that week, Sarah's eyes felt gritty from staring at endless paperwork, and Bradley's voice grew hoarse from phone interviews. Yet the big question still loomed. Who placed baby Adam in that box, and what dark reason did they have for doing it so secretly? One afternoon, Sarah found herself back at the spot where Bradley first discovered the baby, standing by the curve in the road. Long weeds rustled in the wind, and an old barbed wire fence sagged under the weight of time. She tried to picture the scene. A car pulling up under cover of darkness, headlights off, a figure gingerly placing a box on the ground, then driving off into the night. That image gnawed at her, fueling a deep conviction that this wasn't just a desperate act. It was a deliberate attempt to erase a child from someone's life. As the second week approached, tensions rose. Local reporters camped outside the hospital, seeking any scrap of news. The county's rumor mill churned faster, with some insisting the entire incident was a hoax. On social media, a vocal minority attacked law enforcement for not doing enough and demanded immediate results. But Sarah knew complex cases rarely resolved neatly. Finding the truth would require patience, diligence, and possibly a willingness to confront something more disturbing than any of them had yet imagined. A full week had now passed since baby Adam's arrival at Preston County General Hospital, and the leads surrounding his abandonment felt more tangled than ever. Detective Sarah Collins walked the corridors of the station each morning, hoping for a breakthrough that never seemed to come. Meanwhile, Officer Jonathan Bradley revisited the stretch of road again and again, scrutinizing the ground and nearby fields for any sign of who had left the box. His frustration grew with each empty-handed return. Out of the blue, a junior deputy named Jacobs presented Sarah with a faded manila folder labeled Caldwell Family Disturbances. Inside lay more than a decade's worth of reports, everything from noise complaints to allegations of child endangerment. The Caldwells owned a decrepit farm just 3 miles from where Adam was found. One report described a teenage Caldwell girl who vanished for months, only to return thin and skittish. Another recounted neighbors hearing what they thought were infant cries late at night, though the police never found evidence. A chill rippled through Sarah. If a pattern of hidden births lurked beneath these pages, baby Adam might be tied to something far darker than a one-time act of desperation. Sheriff Alderman granted Sarah and Bradley permission to quietly check out the Caldwell property. They arrived one humid afternoon, driving up a rutted path flanked by overgrown trees. The farmhouse that came into view was in poor shape, sagging porch, missing shingles, windows patched with duct tape. At first, no one answered their knocks. Eventually, an elderly woman in a threadbare sweater appeared around the corner. She introduced herself as Margaret Caldwell and glared with open hostility, insisting she didn't know anything about a baby. Her voice trembled slightly, though, betraying more emotion than she cared to show. Bradley tried to defuse the tension by asking routine questions, but Margaret dismissed them. "We mind our own," she declared. "You should do the same." With that, she retreated around the side of the house, leaving Sarah and Bradley standing under the creaking porch. They had no warrant, no probable cause to push further. All they could do was note the dilapidated property and the occupants' palpable fear. Back at the station, Sarah pored over the Caldwell file with renewed urgency. Mentions of possible hush money, rumored miscarriages, and neighbors complaining about strange disappearances filled the margins of old deputy logs. Nothing conclusive, but enough to suggest a legacy of dark secrets. A local social worker named Desiree Fowler soon called, saying she'd once tried to help a pregnant Caldwell teenager before being chased off the property by a furious family member. "I got the sense they'd do anything to keep their business hidden," Desiree warned. The puzzle pieces began to line up in Sarah's mind. Could one of the Caldwell daughters have given birth to Adam in secret, then abandoned him? If so, why in that remote spot? If not the Caldwells, was there another family with a similarly murky history? The deeper she dug, the more she saw the outlines of a pattern. In certain rural enclaves, generational shame and fear sometimes led to extreme solutions. Meanwhile, local rumor mills went wild. Some townspeople whispered that the Caldwells weren't the only ones with skeletons in their closets. There were at least 2 other families in the area with rumors of hush-hush pregnancies. Others believed a larger group or network might be trading infants. Most rumors spiraled into half-truths or conspiracies, but Sarah noted them all. Experience taught her that even outlandish hearsay sometimes contained a kernel of reality. Amid the tension, Baby Adam's condition continued to brighten. Doctors reported that he'd gained weight, responding well to consistent feeding and gentle handling. He even began to babble softly, an innocent sound in the midst of so much uncertainty. Sarah visited often, feeling a rising protectiveness toward the tiny child who unknowingly spurred this entire investigation. On the 8th day, a new tip arrived at the station. A trembling voice suggested that a pregnant girl had been seen in the Caldwell yard a few months before, only to vanish soon after. No one knew her name. The neighbors who witnessed it were too frightened to speak up officially. They'd seen a slender figure with a swollen belly, pacing near a barn, then gone in a flash. Sarah's instincts flared again. If that girl gave birth, and the baby was Adam, then the family might have forcibly covered it up. Yet for all the threads Sarah tugged, tangible evidence remained elusive. The Caldwells refused further interviews. No birth certificates connected them to the baby. The alleged pregnant girl was nowhere to be found. Officer Bradley checked local high schools for any teen who abruptly dropped out, with no luck. Each attempt to pry information from reluctant neighbors yielded the same response: fear. Behind closed doors, Sarah and Bradley worried that the boy in the cardboard box might only scratch the surface of what was really going on. Could there be other discarded infants, other tragedies swept under the rug? A disturbing sense of scale crept in, as if they'd stepped into a story that had repeated for years, quietly, in the lonely back roads and dilapidated farms of Preston County. Reporters caught wind of the Caldwell rumors and hounded Sarah for confirmation. She offered no comment, refusing to feed the sensationalism. Sheriff Alderman publicly urged calm, but inside, he too wrestled with the possibility that this single baby's rescue might unravel a dark tradition. Tensions mounted around the station as new warnings poured in from locals who claimed they'd seen strange lights on the Caldwell property at night, or heard muffled cries near the woods behind the farm. Some insisted they'd share more if guaranteed anonymity, but even then, details were scarce. With each passing day, the puzzle tightened. Sarah felt haunted by the parallels between old Caldwell accounts and the present case. The same hush, the same swirl of whispered rumors. Could a toxic family secret have escalated to the point where leaving a newborn on the roadside was seen as the only option? Returning home late one night, Sarah found her thoughts looping back to Adam's tiny face. She couldn't stop imagining the moment he was placed inside that box, abandoned to the night. Everything in her screamed that they were missing a crucial piece, some direct link that would blow the investigation wide open. The deeper she delved, the more she sensed that confronting the Caldwells, or whoever was behind this, would mean tearing down walls of silence built over generations. And she had a foreboding feeling that tearing down those walls would unleash secrets far more horrifying than anyone was ready to face. As the days wore on, the uneasy atmosphere in Preston County only thickened. It had been over 2 weeks since Officer Bradley discovered baby Adam in that cardboard box, and each revelation hinted at deeper, more entrenched secrets. Detective Sarah Collins, relentless by nature, pressed harder on every lead, but she felt as if she were navigating a maze where the walls shifted each time she turned a corner. Officer Bradley noticed a subtle shift in how people treated him. Shop owners who once greeted him warmly now grew tight-lipped, as though fearing he might ask about things they dare not discuss. A note left on the windshield of his patrol car simply read, "Don't make trouble." Meanwhile, Sarah began noticing shadows in her peripheral vision, anxious glances, muffled gossip that fell silent whenever she neared. Determined to break the stalemate, Sarah spent long hours cross-referencing property records, focusing on any Caldwell-owned location beyond their main farm. One address jumped out, an old storage barn, listed under a distant relative's name. She and Bradley visited on a muggy afternoon. The barn stood half-collapsed, filled with rotting wood and rusted equipment. A few footprints marred the dusty floor, but no clear leads emerged. Sarah felt certain people had been here, yet she couldn't prove it. That night, returning to her small rental house, she found a folded paper slipped under her door. "Back off. We see you." Her heart thundered as she checked each window lock. Though no one was in sight, she felt eyes watching from the dark. The next evening, Bradley nearly got rammed off the road by a dark SUV with tinted windows. It swerved around him, forcing him to yank the wheel hard to avoid a ditch. By the time he regained control, the SUV had vanished. He reported it, but there were no leads to follow. Both incidents reeked of warning shots, attempts to scare them away from investigating further. Sheriff Alderman held a closed-door briefing with them. "I'm hearing from certain folks up the chain that we need to tread lightly," he said, bitterness creeping into his voice. "Claims about the Caldwell name, or about unproven conspiracies. They say we're fueling rumors that damage the county's reputation. But it sounds more like someone with influence is leaning on us. Sarah refused to let that dampen her resolve. She redoubled her focus on the Caldwell angle. Digging deeper into old police logs, she found references to buried truths and dark family business. Some of these notes were cryptic scribbles scrawled in margins, nothing official, yet too consistent to ignore. Bradley, forging ahead, collected stories from frightened neighbors about nighttime gatherings at the farm, about packages being loaded into trucks. None of it rose to the level of probable cause, but the pattern felt menacing. One afternoon, a frail high school teacher, Miss Porter, summoned the courage to stop by the station. Hands trembling, she confided that a Caldwell teen had disappeared mid-semester, rumored to be pregnant. She came to class a few times looking pale, always wearing baggy clothes, Miss Porter whispered. Then she just vanished. The Caldwell family told the school she moved out of state. But something about the timing. The baby you found could be hers. Terrified, Miss Porter refused to give an on-record statement, glancing over her shoulder as if she expected someone to burst in. Local media kept fueling the drama. A few reporters camped at the edges of the Caldwell property, but heavy shutters and a no trespassing sign met them. Online theories ran wild. Talk of a baby trafficking ring, or even a family cult. Some folks posted screenshots of the farmhouse at night, claiming they saw lights in the barn's loft. Others derided the entire investigation as a witch hunt. All the noise made it harder for Sarah and Bradley to parse real clues. Then came a jarring escalation. While following up on a tip in a remote corner of the county, Bradley's patrol car was sideswiped by the same dark SUV. The impact nearly spun him off the road. Shaken, he managed to stay on the asphalt, but it was undeniably a deliberate act. "They're getting bolder," he told Sarah, eyes burning with anger. "Whoever's behind this won't stop at threats." The tension peaked when a cryptic voicemail reached the station late one evening. A hushed voice told them to search the woods behind the Caldwell farm. It ended with, "Don't come alone." Suspecting a setup, but unable to ignore the lead, Sarah and Bradley enlisted two plainclothes deputies and headed out just before dusk. They parked a mile off, then moved quietly through the forest, branches snapping underfoot, hearts hammering. Sure enough, they came upon a small clearing where the earth looked recently disturbed. Kneeling to inspect the soil, Bradley froze as a distant shout sliced the silence. Someone had spotted them. In a rush of adrenaline, the group retreated, flashlights bobbing through the thick undergrowth. Twigs snapped behind them, but no one gave chase. They reached their vehicles, breath ragged. Whatever lay hidden in that clearing would remain undiscovered for now. The message was clear: they weren't welcome here, and prying any further could be dangerous. Driving away, Sarah couldn't help but revisit the moment she first saw baby Adam in the hospital. The child's tiny body, so close to danger, had awakened something fierce in her. The more ominous the warnings, the more determined she became to unearth the truth. She feared that Adam's abandonment was just one chapter in a far darker narrative, one that involved an entire web of intimidation and possibly worse. By now, nearly everyone in the county seemed consumed by rumor and fear. A handful of locals quietly thanked Sarah and Bradley for trying to protect their community from whatever evil lurked in the shadows. But others cast them wary, sidelong glances, as though any association with law enforcement might invite retribution. It was a weight Sarah felt acutely each time she turned her key in her front door. She checked her phone messages obsessively, half expecting another anonymous threat. And still, the biggest question lingered. If they were willing to risk everything to hide one abandoned baby, what horrors might they have concealed before? Sarah had no doubt there was more to discover. Pushing forward, though, would mean stepping straight into the path of people who would do anything, absolutely anything, to guard their secrets. The atmosphere around Preston County grew so tense, it felt like the whole region was holding its breath. Detective Sarah Collins and Officer Jonathan Bradley continued their dogged investigation, haunted by each new rumor and every roadside threat. Baby Adam, now growing stronger by the day in his hospital crib, remained the fragile centerpiece of a case that seemed to unearth deeper darkness at every turn. Signs of open hostility started surfacing. One morning, Sarah found crude red paint slashed across the hood of her personal car. "Stop or suffer." She reported it, but there were no cameras in the area, no witnesses. Bradley, too, felt eyes on him whenever he stopped for gas or groceries, as if the entire county had split into those desperate for the truth and those determined to bury it. Then the long-awaited break arrived. but not in a form anyone expected. A trembling 16. Her first words came out a whisper. "I'm so sorry about the baby." Sarah's heart jumped, but she kept her voice steady. Emily confessed that she was indeed baby Adam's mother. She'd hidden her pregnancy for months, terrified of her domineering relatives. They said a new baby would bring shame. Emily murmured, tears brimming. "My uncle. He told me to get rid of it, no matter how." Emily recounted a harrowing story of secrecy and threat, describing how the Caldwells had a history of forcing teenage girls to abandon, or worse, any child deemed inconvenient. "I couldn't go through with something worse," she choked, trembling. "I hoped someone would find him in time if I just left him by the road." Her voice cracked under the weight of guilt, a sorrow almost too big for her teenage frame. Sarah signaled Officer Bradley to join them, and they carefully probed for details. Emily revealed that her uncle, Martin Caldwell, orchestrated the intimidation campaign. He had connections, people who do favors, as she put it, willing to harass or injure anyone who got too curious. According to Emily, Martin was the driving force behind multiple forced abandonments in the family over the years. If a girl got pregnant outside certain rules, the infant was taken care of, hush money might change hands, and the mother was sworn to silence under threat of violence. In the hush of that interview room, Emily spoke of cryptic late-night gatherings, abandoned barns where pregnant girls were hidden away, and rumors that not all babies had survived as miraculously as Adam did. Sarah fought to maintain composure. As Emily's story poured out, it became painfully clear that these buried truths the logs hinted at were literal. Some infants had never been found. Sheriff Alderman, informed immediately, wasted no time. With Emily's formal statement in hand, plus emergency court clearance, the department mobilized for a coordinated raid on the Caldwell farm and any related properties. Officers from neighboring counties joined, forming a task force to descend on the farmland at dawn. The tension crackled in the air as the sun's first rays lit the horizon. This was the moment they'd been racing toward, and a sense of grim resolve filled the caravan of patrol cars. At the Caldwell property, they were met with unexpected resistance. Martin Caldwell and a few associates blocked the driveway, brandishing weapons in a tense standoff. For a few perilous minutes, it looked like open violence might erupt. Sarah, bulletproof vest tied against her chest, stood behind a patrol car door with her service pistol drawn. She could see Martin's eyes dart wildly, like a trapped animal realizing the end was near. Then, with a barked command, Sheriff Alderman ordered the men to drop their weapons. The echo of that shout seemed to break whatever nerve Martin clung to. One by one, his group complied, setting rifles on the ground. Within minutes, the yard was swarming with law enforcement. Officers fanned out, searching barns, sheds, every corner of the dilapidated farmhouse. Inside the main house, investigators found hidden compartments stuffed with old birth records, cash envelopes, and cryptic ledgers, some suggesting payoffs to keep certain births off the record. A stale stench clung to the second-floor hallway, where padlocked doors opened onto tiny rooms strewn with stained mattresses and leftover baby supplies. Bradley felt his stomach churn. Every step hammered home how many tragedies had likely unfolded behind these walls. A separate search party followed GPS coordinates Emily provided to an overgrown patch of forest behind the property, the same area Sarah and Bradley had fled weeks earlier. Under layers of leaf litter, the ground yielded horrors, shallow graves containing the remains of infants who hadn't survived. The discovery shook even the most seasoned officers. Word traveled back to the farmhouse, and a hush seemed to cloak the entire operation, an acknowledgement of the lives lost to a twisted, hidden system. Martin Caldwell, along with several older family members, was taken into custody on a slew of charges, ranging from conspiracy to commit child endangerment to homicide. Emily, protected by the state's child welfare officials, was placed in a safe location. Her testimony was crucial in unraveling the years of extortion and terror Martin had inflicted on pregnant relatives. The days that followed blurred into a storm of media coverage, forensic work, and emotional upheaval. Federal agencies stepped in, investigating any interstate elements of the scandal. Locals flocked to the station with news statements, relieved that the Caldwell grip on their community had been shattered. The revelations ignited public outrage, but also a collective sigh that the old cycle of fear might finally be broken. Through it all, baby Adam remained under the careful watch of hospital staff. Emily, still in shock, was allowed supervised visits. She clung to the baby, tears streaming down her face each time she held him, whispering apologies no one could quite make out. Sarah observed from a distance, torn between sorrow for the teen mother's trauma and relief that Adam would live free from the Caldwell web of threats. A few weeks later, with enough evidence compiled to press charges and rescue any other vulnerable girls, life in Preston County began a slow march toward normalcy. Martin Caldwell and his accomplices faced trial in a swirl of media attention that would haunt the community for years. The farmland, once the site of secrets, was marked off limits, slated for a thorough search that might uncover more buried truths. In the final days before the case moved to higher courts, Sarah Collins visited baby Adam one last time at the hospital. Plans had been made for him to be placed in a loving foster home pending the outcome of the legal process. Emily's fate remained uncertain, but child welfare workers hoped therapy and a stable environment might give her a second chance after the horrors she'd endured. Standing in the quiet pediatric wing, Sarah gently touched the baby's tiny hand. He cooed, oblivious to the darkness from which he'd been rescued. For a moment, Sarah closed her eyes, thinking back to how this had all started: a single phone call, a cardboard box on a deserted road. It still chilled her how close Adam came to slipping through the cracks. She whispered a silent promise that he, and all the unnamed children who didn't survive, would never be forgotten. Walking out of the hospital, she spotted Officer Bradley waiting by his patrol car. He looked tired but resolute, the weight of the investigation still fresh in his eyes. They exchanged a nod, a mutual acknowledgement of the battles fought and the lives forever changed. The sun was setting over Preston County, casting long shadows across the parking lot. Yet for the first time since Adam's discovery, it felt like the end of a storm that had nearly swallowed them all. Though the echoes of that darkness would linger in memory, at least now there was hope. Hope for justice, hope for healing, and hope that one innocent child's rescue might finally uproot an evil that had thrived on secrecy for far too long.